Homefront is a 2011 first-person shooter released on 3 platforms, and it's a game that really deserved better if you ask me. Developed by Chaos Studios and published by THQ, this is largely considered to be THQ's Stranglehold, if you will, a big-budget, high-profile game that would hopefully save a company facing bankruptcy. And unfortunately, it did not save them, and THQ would end up filing for bankruptcy the following year, which is a shame, as this is a mighty fine game in my opinion. Anyways, I want to start my review by saying that Homefront's soundtrack really caught me off guard, as I was not expecting it to be as good as it was. Still not on the level of something like Jurassic the Hunted, but the OST was amazing in my opinion. And on the topic of presentation, this game looks pretty good graphically, and the voice actors were really good if you ask me. Performance-wise, there was a bit of lag once or twice, but these were very minor issues that could be easily overlooked. Getting into gameplay, this is a pretty standard FPS for the time. You have 2 guns that you can swap out when you come across new weapons. Press on the right joystick to melee for primary grenades, and sometimes secondary nades, although the only secondary grenades that I found in the campaign were C4, which are pretty useless. And of course, you have a standard regenerating health system. Now that said, you're sometimes accompanied by a semi-autonomous drone named Goliath, which you can use to destroy and target specific enemies using a targeter. There's also a section where you pilot a helicopter, and a couple areas where you man a machine gun on a vehicle. Pretty basic and standard stuff that you'll probably enjoy if you like COD and Battlefield games of the time. As far as a weapon selection goes, this title does offer a lot of guns to choose from, all of which are real guns to the best of my knowledge, but none of them really stood out to me, but at least 1 or 2 did have grenade launchers. Now, one thing I will note is that, unlike in something such as Call of Duty, you can't really hold a lot of ammo with most firearms. It'll be something like 3 or 4 extra magazines max, versus in some FPSs where you can hold like 13 magazines per gun. Just wanted to mention this. As for objectives, this title did a good job of making sure that you knew what to do and where to go, with objective markers and notices. Game length wise, you can finish Homefront on normal difficulty in 6-ish hours, and the campaign is divided up into 7 chapters. That said, this title has one really cool feature, being that, after you complete a level, you can go back and restart it from any checkpoint in that level, versus how in most games, you can only replay levels from the start. This was something that I thought was really cool, even though most people probably never used it. I guess the last thing to mention gameplay-wise is that Homefront does have some pretty big open levels that made me think of Enemy Front, and this game did a pretty good job of showing a war-torn America in said large levels. Also, this title does have some destructible environments similar to Battlefield, which was neat. Finally, my last note about the campaign is that I kept seeing QR codes hidden on walls throughout the game. My old phone doesn't have a scanner, but my wife's newer phone does, and she let me borrow it to scan one of the codes, and nothing happened. I don't know why, maybe her phone is messed up, or maybe the codes weren't actually usable. But if anyone can add some insight here, that'd be much appreciated. And yeah, like I said, a pretty standard FPS for the time, with a few noteworthy features. But what made this game stand out to me was the story. Taking place in 2027, Homefront tells the tale of a fake scenario in which North Korea becomes a massive world superpower, conquers a large chunk of Asia, and then successfully attacks and invades the US after crippling its economy. And you play as a dude named Jacobs, yes, Jake-Ubs with an S, who joins a resistance movement after being arrested by North Koreans for seemingly no reason. Now, the story is told in a mix of cutscenes and newspaper clippings scattered around the game, and in a similar nature to BioShock, these side notes are actually worth hunting down and reading, as they are very entertaining and they really help build the world and explain the story of this game. I found roughly 25 of 60, and there are achievements for finding 1, 30, and all 60 of these clippings. And while the story in Homefront wasn't the best story ever, I did really like it, and it had several emotional moments and a ending that I was not expecting. Also, the opening cinematic for this game was amazing, and I watched it a couple of times. If you have not seen the opening cutscene for this video game, go look it up after my review. Plus, this title even got a companion book that I might have to read someday. Okay, well, I guess that largely wraps up the campaign mode. I reckon I could add that this game seemingly had several obvious advertisements from real-life companies, as vending machines for NOS and Full Throttle Energy are very clearly plopped in front of you at some times. And this game contains actual Hooters and White Castle restaurants in both the story and the multiplayer mode. And speaking of MP, time to shift over to that. Unfortunately, I can't say a lot here, as my Game Pass is currently expired, but I've heard almost nothing but praise for the MP from back in the day, and I believe the servers are still up actually, and you can even play locally and via LAN. Although my wife had zero interest in playing this game. That said, you can create a local MP game and just explore empty maps, which I did a couple of times, and the MP seems like it could have been fun. Now, if what I read is correct, this game discouraged you from buying the game used, by locking some MP features behind a code that came with new copies of the game, similar to how games like DOA 5, Tekken Tag 2, and Grid 2 came with one-time use online passes. The difference here being, you can use online MP without a pass, you just cannot level up beyond level 5 without one. And while my copy of the game came with 3 passes for some reason, you can no longer redeem codes for non-backwards compatible games, so even if my codes happen to be unused, I can't use them. Man, Xbox needs to reopen the 360 store. Anyways, getting a bit more into the MP, based off what I read in the manual, there aren't too many modes. You have your standard team deathmatch, of course, and also something called ground control, which, based off the description, sounds akin to Gardens and Graveyards from the Garden Warfare series. There's also a mode called Battle Mode, which seems interesting, but again, I was unable to actually play it. Now, the MP seemed to have a cool point system, which you could use to buy things before and during a match, like armor, special weapons, or even spawning in a vehicle. And yeah, Homefront, a game that I really enjoyed, and while my opinions on this game might be different if I'd bought it for full price back in the day, I certainly got my $5 worth for a used CIB copy in 2026, and I give this game a 9 out of 10 by my grade scale. Definitely worth checking out if you like Xbox 360 first-person shooters. As far as similar games I could recommend, I would go with Modern Warfare 3 or maybe Enemy Front. And a little side note apart from my review, if what I read is true, this game is outlawed in South Korea, and in its uncensored form, it's also banned in Japan. For South Korea, because in this game, North and South Korea become one country, which caused the game to be outlawed. For Japan, the game was censored because Kim Jong-un and North Korea are the main villains. And apparently there's some law against this in Japan, which I thought was odd. Something about not being allowed to show real-life living politicians as bad people in media. Or something. I'm just glad that I live in a place where, to the best of my knowledge, there are no banned video games, and I can buy and play whatever I want. Anyways, for those new here, I mostly review and discuss Xbox 360 games, so feel free to sub if that sounds interesting. And follow me on GameRam for hints at upcoming vids and behind the scenes stuff. As for our Bible verse of the day, I read Isaiah 53:6 NIV. We all, like sheep, have gone astray. Each of us has turned to our own way, and the Lord has laid on him the iniquity of us all. And like always, none of my content is made by fake intelligence. Keep YouTube human and only watch man-made vids. And I never give permission for my voice and likeness to be copied and altered by clankers in any way. God bless, take it easy, peace. Getting into gameplay. As for objectives,